Right. So, hi, everyone. Welcome, welcome. We are super excited to welcome Jennifer Hirsch. Did I get the last name correct? Did I
You did.
pronounce it correctly? Yes. Okay, great. So, super excited to welcome Jennifer Hirsch, who is a Senior Associate Dean of International Admissions at Claremont McKenna. Jennifer, welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here.
Absolutely. Okay, great. So we're recording this in August, and we were just having a quick chat about the summer and how quickly it's flown by. But more on that on another episode. But for today, really wanted us to talk about Claremont McKenna. You may hear us use or say CMC instead of Claremont McKenna, but in case you're wondering what that is, it's of course Claremont McKenna. But I definitely want to get started by, if you can tell us a little bit about the consortium and what is the role of Claremont McKenna inside of that consortium.
Yes, that is actually where I start with every information session I give, so it's a perfect place. So Claremont McKenna College is a part of the Claremont Colleges, which is a consortium of 7 institutions of higher education. 5 of them are undergraduate liberal arts institutions, and 2 are graduate schools. So this consortium was founded and the thought project of many years ago, but they are actually modeled after Cambridge and Oxford. So independent institutions that are next to each other and have very intentional collaborations. So a very quick history. The first college of the Claremont Colleges was founded in the late 1880s, and that was Pomona College. It was founded by graduates of New England liberal arts colleges. So that was the whole point, was to bring this New England liberal arts college to the West Coast of the United States. And in the early 1900s, the president of Pomona sort of spearheaded this concept of the Claremont colleges to bring more access to higher education in the region. Um, from there, every institution after Pomona was founded with intentionally within the decade it was founded in the United States. So our missions all relate to historical events and cultural events that happened in each decade. And so the composition of the Claremont colleges is unique from other consortiums for a few different reasons. One, all of our institutions, our campuses are actually in 1 square mile or 2.3 square kilometers. I might be a little off on the conversion, but somewhere in there.
It sounds right. It sounds about right. Yeah.
And so where our campuses are actually contiguous, they line up right next to each other. They fit together like a puzzle. It is a little bit hard to conceptualize, but we look like one large campus, but we're actually 6 separate campuses. One of the graduate schools is a little bit further away. But for the undergraduate institution, that really allows a collegial shared environment. And for the undergraduate schools, those include Pomona College, was the first. Scripps College was founded in the 1920s during women's suffrage, so it is an all-women's institution. Claremont McKenna was founded in the 1940s, right after World War II, and that we have a focus on economics and public policy. Harvey Mudd was founded in the 1950s, during the space waste and the Cold War. So there's an emphasis on STEM, and they are a unique blend of a STEM college and a liberal arts college. And then Pitzer College was founded in the early 1960s, in the midst of the civil rights movement here in the US, and so very much focused on social justice values. And the 5 undergraduate colleges, it allows students to take classes at the other campuses. Across the campuses, there's shared clubs and organizations. You can eat in all the dining halls. But we are separate, functionally separate institutions. So admission is different, is separate. Residence life is completely separate from each other. We own and operate our own campuses with those intentional collaborations. So CMC's role in that is we are one of the 5 undergraduate schools, and that's probably where the most cohesive and beneficial collaborations take place, is between those 5, and the 2 graduate schools are there and wonderful, but a little more tangential.
Right. That's great. What a super introduction. I mean, I like the way how you set it all up, right? Definitely gives us more perspective about, the role of other schools and why they were set up as well. And it just helps to put everything together. So thank you for
Yeah,
that.
absolutely.
So what would you say is, the culture like
Mhm.
at CMC? What's that like?
Yes. So for CMC specifically, everything can draw from our mission. And I have a portion of the mission memorized, not the entire the entire mission statement, which is online, so you can all find it. But the really important element, sort of segment of our mission, where you can kind of go back to and see the roots of everything is our goal to prepare students for thoughtful and productive lives and responsible leadership in business, government, and the professions. So the three core values that come out of our mission, two very much aligned with that portion of the mission statement, is this emphasis as a liberal arts college on economics, public policy, government, sort of understanding the public and private sectors in society. The emphasis on leadership. So that's something that is tied into the experience and the culture at CMC, but also, what a major component of what we look for in the application process. And then another value that is sort of tied all together, but not quite as explicit in the portion that I have memorized, is this focus on constructive dialogue, viewpoint diversity, and freedom of expression. So all of those things really create a very pragmatic and forward-thinking culture at CMC, where students often are very goal-oriented, driven, self-motivated. They all do in various ways see themselves as leaders and it's more importantly as future leaders. But they're also extremely collaborative and social in a lot of ways, so very eager to engage with others. I think they have a strong understanding of the world around them and that those partnerships and teamwork, collaboration, and not always being the literal leader is important to being a strong leader in life. And so it can be a very high energy, very dynamic community, can be fast paced. I think you get an equal intensity on the academic, professional, and social levels. So staff and faculty do try to talk to students about knowing when to take a step back, knowing when it's okay to not be a part of something. So that dynamic, yeah, very high energy, very high energy. Mhm.
And that's amazing, right? And that's what the whole collegiate experience should be about as well, right? So many of our students, Jennifer, who are coming in from international countries, and some of them haven't been to the US before, and a lot of what they learn about colleges and universities is primarily online, right? But as if you look online, sometimes colleges can seem similar, right? So,
Yeah.
all of them will talk about having the best resources and the best professors and, many bests.
Yes.
So, what would you say? And I know you've alluded to some of this before, you've spoken about leadership, but what, according to you, would be like the three biggest things that CMC has to offer for students?
Yes, that is a good question. First and foremost, I think where we differ from other liberal arts colleges is our pragmatism. We have like the institution based on our history, our mission, and this sort of focus on leadership and econ and public policy. Um, there's this very tangible, pragmatic approach to the education. While we want our students to have broad base of liberal arts experiences academically in the classroom, we want them to understand theory and ideas. We do take a bit of a departure. The culture in the institution as a whole kind of turns a little bit in a different direction than the true sort of purely intellectually driven liberal arts philosophy and where that can, and I've worked at other liberal arts colleges, and that is a little bit more prominent of the just sort of thinking about all of the philosophical ideas and concepts and just kind of ruminating over all of that intellectual theory and knowledge. And that's a great space and a wonderful place for a college student if that's sort of their mindset. CMC is very much about these 4 years are 4 intentional steps towards life and a career and a path of, of meaningful work in the future. And so I think that pragmatism sets us apart and is a bit unique, and I think appeals to a lot of students that might be in between bigger, more professional schools or professional programs and then a liberal arts environment. I also think that our career services at CMC, while not unique in having career services, I think our approach, which is very much individualized, it's very early. So we have a first-year advisor. The goal is to meet with students all the first year, in the entire first-year class face-to-face in that first year. There's intensive programs in those first weeks of school for first years in particular. And getting students, the goal is to get every first-year student into an internship or an experience this summer after their first year, connecting them with the alumni network, robust funding for students that need it over the summer for unpaid opportunities. And that kind of takes this pragmatism into that career services space. And then the third piece that I think is becoming more unique and more special in higher education in the United States is our program that we call the Open Academy, which is fully built on viewpoint diversity, constructive dialogue, and freedom of expression, and ensuring that our students are in an academic, and educational, and a social space where they can actually have conversations across difference, whether it's different backgrounds, worldviews, political views, perspectives on social issues, economic issues, whatever it is, that they can have those conversations, and it can be constructive, even if it ends in a disagreement or not ever coming to be in the same space on how they view that. And yet you can still be colleagues and friends and teammates and roommates, best friends even, co-lead a club together, that all of these things can all be true. And so my last point on that would be the Athenaeum Speaker Series is the program that I think is the cornerstone to those values, where we're bringing 80 speakers to campus every year every 4 days a week of the academic year. So every Monday through Thursday, we have a talk in a building called the Athenaeum.
Oh,
And
wow.
yeah, and it's great. It's actually a dinner program. So there's a reception, a plated dinner where only CMC students can sit at the head table with the speaker, the talk, and then Q&A where preference is given to student questions. And that brings an immense diversity of perspectives from speakers. There's alumni that are represented in that broad range of speakers. There's politicians, there's innovators, there's leaders of companies, of nonprofits, people at various points in their careers and experiences in leadership, but really highlighting what leadership means across all spectrums of society and encouraging students to engage in constructive dialogue and debate.
Yeah, I mean, that is amazing. And what I really love about what you said also, Jennifer, is that, not only do students come in and they leave learning so much about different professions, different industries, things that they may not have thought about earlier, right? And it's all part of that value system of, encouraging open-mindedness and dialogue and all those things. But in addition to that, I mean, talk about like great networking opportunities as well, right? Because if you're sitting on the table with that speaker, right? Because at the end of the day, of course, these kids are coming into college. They want to be able to walk away with really good jobs and prospects and things like that. And I think doing this 4 days a week is incredible,
Yeah.
right? Especially for the students. So, I mean, it sounds amazing.
Yeah.
Right.
We think so too.
Yeah, of course, of course. And I know you mentioned a little bit about this earlier, but you did say something about having a broad-based education system. And I know that, unlike some other schools that talk about, just being able to pick and choose whatever classes you want to take, I know CMC is big about having this required gen ed or general education program. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes. Yes, and I have worked at my first institution that I worked at was a purely open curriculum. So
There you
so
go.
CMC lands probably on the other side of that spectrum. Maybe not super rigid, but It is more structured for sure. So the core elements of the general education requirements for CMC students really start with the first year writing seminar and the first year humanities seminar. So those are two courses. One's taken each semester in the first year, and it's capped at 12 first years for every section. So it's actually not the same content per section. Every section is taught by a different professor. In the writing seminars, those are literature professors, and people in our writing center also teach those courses. And it's the skill set that is sort of the commonality across all the sections for the first year class. And then with the humanities seminar, that's taught by professors across all the disciplines. So for writing, pretty self-explanatory. It's really giving a strong foundation of writing experience of expectation at CMC, and getting students in the practice of what they're going to be expected of any professor in any discipline on writing assignments and papers and research and whatnot. For humanities, it's a lot more about the critical thinking, the analyzing and synthesizing information. So the information that they're learning, the content is not the main element. It's the skill sets that they're, learning how to learn and how to ask questions, how to investigate, how to dig deeper, and then how to present. So writing, communication, presentation skills, collaborating with peers. And again, that's going to happen across all disciplines. So those are the most important, and those are both taken in the first year, one in each semester, fall and spring. And then from there, students will have to take at least one lab science. We have a quantitative math requirement, at least through pre-calc, so one math class, at least when you're here, not pre-calc, but at least calculus is the minimum. So in terms of admission, we want students to have at least pre-calculus coming in. And then there's the humanities requirements and the social sciences. And those are a little bit more flexible, in which you have to take 2 humanities courses across a few different disciplines. So there's a lot more choice in that. And for social sciences, it's 3 different courses from a few, like 4 or 5 disciplines. And but kind of going back to what I said earlier about our emphasis on economics and government, the majority of students at CMC will often have had an intro econ and an intro to American politics, which is sort of the intro government course, to have that foundation, regardless of if they take any other classes in those disciplines or major in them. Most students have that, foundation of understanding econ and government. And then there is a PE requirement. Which is a little old-fashioned potentially. I have never heard a student complain about it, because that can be fulfilled by a very traditional sport, or meditation class, yoga class. We have like Pilates and yoga partnerships with studios in town. So like you might not even do it on campus. So I think we've made it very accessible.
No, and that's great because it's all about having that balance, right? As well. And I love how you have the PE. I did not know about that, but I love it. I think it's good. And you're emphasizing things that are important to students, right? And you're basically making a statement to say, hey, this is important. Academics are important. But along with that, don't forget about yourself, that whole self-care piece that I feel is the first thing to go down the drain sometimes.
Unfortunately, yes.
Yes. But I love how CMC has this as part of the requirement. That's great. And again, it all circles back to the fact that students coming into the program into college may not really know what they don't know, right? So getting them to take all these different classes really encourages them to learn about, different aspects and different fields, and then perhaps make a more informed decision. At least that's the goal, right? About what they want to do later on in their career.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I love that. And the other program, Jennifer, that has, I've seen a recent interest,
Mhm.
is about your 3-2 program, the economics and engineering program. And I don't think too many students know about that. And sometimes also, Jennifer, I will have students who will say that, I want to do engineering, but I also like business. And I'm like, okay,
Mhm.
have you heard about this program? They're like, they have no clue. So please enlighten us. Tell us about this program.
Absolutely. So our 3-2 engineering program, so the 3+2 is 3 years at CMC, where students will complete requirements in the economics major and some foundations in science, and then apply to in their junior year, will apply to an engineering school that brings in the 3-2 portion of the 3-2 major. And so many of our students are going into let's see, they've gone to USC, Brown, Columbia, the University of Washington in St. Louis, Stanford. There have been a few others. Those are the ones that tend to pop up. Maybe 10 to 15 students every year graduate with a 3-2 major. But for us, what we really like about it is that's our strength is in economics. And so that's why I think the student you described right there, the student that is interested in understanding engineering, not just from a technical standpoint, but from a business standpoint or organizational standpoint, is the one, yeah, that really thrives in this environment because they have sort of the foundation in economics and finance from CMC, and then go on and learn the technical elements of engineering at their other institution. I will bring up, we are going through a slight shift. We are not getting rid of the econ major. It will be named something slightly different, but it will be the same concept. And we are actually adding another 3-2 major in the future. So we are opening a new science center that is online with this incoming class in fall of 2024, and a new building will be online in 2020, summer of 2025. So for students listening now, this is very relevant.
That is
Um,
amazing.
and and within that, it's the Kravis Department of Integrated Sciences. And then within that, there will be the 3+2 major focused on economics, and then a 3+2 major focused on integrated science and engineering. So econ engineering, integrated science and engineering. Mhm.
That's great. That sounds fantastic. And just kind of, coming back to, so I know you mentioned that, like the 3-2 program for the engineering piece, they would go to USC, they would go to Stanford. So does CMC have ties with these schools already, or does it mean that a student can just go ahead and apply, wherever they like? And like, how does that happen?
Yeah, because I know it's done differently, but depending on the school. So we don't have any like agreements or formal pathways. We do have an advisor that works with students and has a good knowledge base of where students go and where they tend to be sort of thrive based on their interests and the econ element of their major. And has a good sense of how competitive a student might be in the application process coming out of CMC with whatever their credentials are, and help guide them to the right institutions. So that does mean that our students have the freedom and flexibility to apply to schools that go beyond that list of traditional places in which our students go. So they are not bound to one institution or a couple institutions, but they are also not necessarily guaranteed admission. Although I do know that the University of Washington, St. Louis, I think is very fond of CMC 3-2 students. So I think that's why they tend to be on that list of common schools.
No, that's great. And then, so last question about this. So then when they graduate,
Mhm.
do they get a degree from both CMC and the other institution? Is that how that works?
It would be, yes, it would be 2 bachelors, one from CMC in economics, or in their major, econ engineering, and then the econ, likely a bachelor's of science in engineering.
Right. And that's so great, right? One
Yeah,
more
yeah.
year and you walk away with two solid degrees, right?
Yes,
Which
yes,
is fantastic for them, right? So
absolutely.
great. Thank you for sharing and kind of
Yeah.
shedding light on that. Um, I know you've spoken about CMC and its strength in econ and public policy, and its strength in leadership and things, and that as well. So, but are there any other majors that are popular, right?
Yes. So yes, econ and gov usually top the list. And then sort of close seconds are international relations, psychology, data science kind of is coming up there as well. In past years, and probably technically still biology. However, with the caveat moving forward is that from now on, our major is integrated science. We'll no longer be offering the straight, purely bio, purely chem, and so on majors. So I think in years to come, as integrated science becomes more ingrained, that integrated science will ultimately replace biology as one of our top 5 majors.
Got it. Got it. And any other new majors? I know you already mentioned this other 3-2 program that's coming up
Yeah.
and about
Yeah.
integrated sciences. Anything else that's been
Well,
added to the list this year?
no, I will elaborate a little bit more on integrated science, just since that is the new one, and it's a whole. So it's the Kravis Department of Integrated Sciences, and the major is integrated science. And this is sort of where it might get a little confusing for students. It is one major, and within that major, the emphasis is understanding the sciences as a collective and how they integrate together and how they connect to each other versus just solely understanding one of the science disciplines at a time. And so the core courses are going to be organized in such a way where you are learning the foundations of biology, chemistry, and physics, along with computation and data science mixed together in sort of a cohesive courses. So it'll be like integrated science 1, 2, those are not the exact course numbers, um, but there won't be like you aren't going to take just solely Bio 101. So like the first integrated course requirements will be a mix of bio and chem in one portion of the class, and then chem and physics in the other portion, or bio and physics together. And so understanding how those come together. And then from there, when students, after the core, like 7 courses of the major, to complete the major, students will think about, can choose one pathway and out of 3. And so the first one, or one of the 3 is focused on the health of humans, so the human body. So more of like a human health focus, but specifically integrating like public policy and understanding healthcare broadly, and not just with a pre-health professions focus, but it does include that, right? So anyone thinking about becoming a doctor or going to medical school, but also people that are thinking of all various types or how to improve healthcare in their country, their community. And then the second pathway is health of the mind, so more of a neuroscience emphasis. And then the last is the health of the planet, so environment, climate, and energy. And this whole department is really created with the understanding of science in the future, like science professions for the direction that we're going, and understanding that each science discipline doesn't exist in a silo. And so being able to learn through at CMC how to tackle actual challenges in society that we know about, that we're anticipating, versus just being a little bit more of that science for research sake. And it's intended to cover all of it, but we really are looking to educate our students to be the problem solvers of the most important science challenges that we currently and face and will face in the future.
Absolutely. And I think what is coming to my mind, Jennifer, is kind of again going back to the culture and the value system. It's all about the practicality. And I
Yes.
can see from what you're saying that that's exactly the direction that the school is going, right? So you're walking the talk, which is
Yes.
important, right? As well. So, I mean, so that's great. That's fantastic. Um, let's take a little turn and
Yeah.
think about admissions, right? Again, now that students have heard about CMC and hopefully they've learned so much from everything that you've so generously shared, if they want to apply, right, and they're thinking about, okay, now how do I go about doing this? I know you're on the Common App, so that's the place to start. But some of the questions that I often get asked is, like, will my major, if I say I want to do data science, or if I say I want to do econ and I'm applying to CMC, is that going to hurt my chances? Like, so I
Yeah.
guess what I'm trying to say is, do you consider as the admissions, when you're reviewing applications, do you look at the student's choice of major when making these decisions? Does that factor in anywhere or not as much?
So yes and no. So yes, we do ask. We ask, what are your academic areas of interest? And we have a full list because students can access other academic opportunities that we don't have at CMC through the other Claremont colleges. Um, so that's possible. So our list of academic options in the Common App will extend beyond what is majors that are administered through CMC specifically. So where we use that information, we don't admit by major. So there's no capacity issues for CMC departments. Students are not being sort of locked into majors or departments or anything when they get here. So very true to the liberal arts, we're not admitting by major. There is an element, though, where we are considering fit with the institution. And so there are a couple majors that we don't have, that if that ends up being a really strong part of a student's application, which is not all that common if students understand who we are, but we don't have theater and art, and those are offered at the other Claremont colleges, so they're a part of our experience. But a very narrowly focused theater student or art student may not find CMC to be a fulfilling place if they don't also have an interest in the things that I've been talking about. And that does happen. Our students are engaged in art, but we have very few art majors, theater majors, or anything of that type. Um, so it's possible that like the academic areas of interest and how prominent they are in the rest of the application can be one consideration that we have when we're thinking about the student's overall fit. And it's not just that they have it, but is that a strong theme through their extracurriculars? Is that seem like the thing that they really want to focus on in college? And then for us, can we offer that? If that's predominantly offered at one of the other Claremont colleges, what is the tie to CMC? So what is the draw to us? And then so if there isn't that strong connection, then that can be one of the considerations we have to keep in mind. In terms of when students are admitted, usually that information is used to assign them a faculty advisor at the start of their first year, but it's not guaranteed that you'll have a faculty advisor in that academic department. And so again, you're not tied to that. A student can come in being very government debate focused, come to CMC, go through those GEs and say, oh, I'm integrated science all the way. I had no idea. So you might have a public policy advisor to start. And then when you find your academic, trajectory, then you would switch your advisor to someone in your major department. So it's kind of a in the middle answer of yes and no. Mostly no, it doesn't have a strong impact, but there are moments where it can, based on the complicated nature of Claremont and the Claremont colleges, how we share and what it means to be a student at each campus.
Sure, that makes sense. That makes sense. And then, just kind of touching upon essays for a moment, right? When you are reviewing student applications, and we're soon going to be getting into application season, right? And reading season. But what are some of the things that you look out for as you're reading or going through applications? Because I know these things get turned around very quickly, right?
Yeah.
So many applications that need to be read, every day. So, I mean, what are some of the things like as you're kind of, going through these documents, what are some of the things that really stand out to you, or what do you consider?
Yes. So in terms of the qualities we're really looking for students, what I always kind of go back to is leadership, initiative, and impact. That can happen through a variety of different types of activities, that can come through at different levels for students at different points in time. They might find their stride with the leadership sort of later in high school, or maybe that's always been a part of their, their story. Maybe that impact comes in at different points. But those are the qualities we're really trying to pull out of every applicant. So we get a lot of that in the resume and understanding how they navigate extracurricular involvements, the depth of their engagement in the various things they're a part of often leads to understanding more initiative, more impact, often takes them to leadership capacities of some sort. And it doesn't always come through as formal positions either. So letters of recommendation shed a lot of light on those things, on those qualities and how they play out for each student as well. The personal statement is a really great way for us to understand how the student understands themselves and their place in the world. I often encourage students to think about an essay topic that highlights a bit of evolution, whether it's evolution, development, change, perspective shift, things that show growth. And again, that can be through a very mundane experience or activity, or that can be from a very life-changing moment in time, or it can just be over the course of time in a really sort of philosophical, reflective way. Every student's different, but us understanding how they view themselves and how they see themselves in the world is often sort of the most helpful theme to read in a personal statement. We do require 2 short answer responses, so short essays, and they're very CMC specific. One is essentially tell us why you want to attend CMC within the context of our mission, and specifically within the portion about being a responsible leader in business, government, and the professions. And the second question is focused on the Open Academy values, so viewpoint diversity, constructive dialogue, and freedom of expression. So those are on our public website well in advance of when the app's open, so students can take a look at those. The last thing I'll add in terms of understanding a student and those qualities I mentioned, we do strongly encourage interviews, and we have an optional video response. So the interview components, there's a few ways in which a student can interview, and those should be done before the deadline in which a student applies. So before November 1, if for early decision 1, and in the fall before January 10th for anyone applying for early decision 2 or regular decision. And we don't request interviews of students. So I think there is some confusion based on school. Oh, they do interviews, but I'll apply and wait for them to give me an interview. You have to proactively do your interview prior to your application deadline that you're applying. And the interview options we do offer some through our office virtually and on campus with senior interviewers, which are current student interviewers. And we do have alumni interviews. For international students, I strongly encourage initial view interviews. They do come at a cost, so it's one of a couple options, and I do talk to students about fee waivers. Just to kind of put my perspective on this, I encourage initial view, not just for students who might not be English as their first language, but also regardless of first language, because the product that we get is a 12-minute conversation that a student has with a professional interviewer whose goal is to make the student look their best, not to figure out how they fit with at college. And so I get to hear 12 minutes of a student telling me their best whatever, right? And it's recorded, it's not altered, it's not graded or graded. The CMC interviews will also have a different kind of benefit. It connects you with a member of the community, but it is through the lens of CMC, which students have the opportunity to do that in other portions of their application. The product from a CMC interview, though, is a write-up from your interviewer. So there is a difference between having an interviewer tell me about their conversation with the applicant versus me watching the applicant talk about themselves. And with more initial interviews being a part of the application, that tends to be where I get a lot more authentic information and a more authentic understanding of the student. So with that in mind, I do tell students, go ahead and, there's options. This is how I, kind of see all of the options, and some will choose the option that makes the most sense for them. And then the last component is we do have the optional video response, which is CMC specific, and there's 4 prompts. This is done after you submit your application within a 2-week window after the deadline. And so students will pick one of 4 prompts, and they will pull in put a 2-minute video together. It's not timed or recorded, or they record it, but it's not timed or live. So they can prep and polish however they want.
I'm sure that's the most fun part of reviewing
Oh,
applications, at
they're
least because,
wonderful.
yeah, exactly. So I don't know if I mentioned, before in conversation, but I was doing some admissions reading for the University of Washington before as well. And I've done a little bit of that. And I know that, we did not have a video interview, but I would assume sitting there going through all the applications, I definitely think that a video response would be nice to kind of, really get to know the student on a different level, I
It
think.
does. It brings the application to life, and there's things that a person can highlight or discuss in verbally that just doesn't come off the page quite the same way in writing.
Exactly. And I think you get a little inkling about the personality of the student as well, right? Because yeah, so I can see how that would be one of the most fun components of the application.
It is for
That's
sure.
great. Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of like, extracurriculars, right?
Mhm.
Are there any, like what are some of the most popular clubs or activities on campus? Like I'm sure that our students would love to know that the model UN team at CMC, I think, is a 4-time champion in 5 years or
It
something
is.
like that. I mean, that is
Yeah,
incredible, right?
thanks for
So
mentioning that. Yeah.
yeah. So are there any other clubs that are especially popular?
There are. So broadly, I'll say just the structure of clubs and organizations. There's over 200, 250 available. Over probably about 200 of those are going to be clubs and organizations that are open to any Claremont College student, undergraduate student. So they're 5C is sort of how we call them. And then there's another 50 to 60 that are CMC specific. Every other college has a subset of clubs that are specific to their school too. And so for CMC students, probably the themes that you'll see, the more common clubs, do end up having a little bit of a professional focus. And so NUN, debate, mock trial, those in that space. We have a big variety of like finance and consulting and like business related clubs and organizations. So there's the Student Investment Fund. There is a variety. There's the Source has consistently been a very popular one. So it's a nonprofit consulting organization, student organization. And so they essentially in groups, in teams, work with a local nonprofit organization sort of in the surrounding cities of Claremont. And they work for these organizations as consultants and work on projects that fit some of their organizational needs. There are students that have started like a venture capitalist firm or club and organization. And there's different kinds of angles to these various, professional kind of lenses. And then there's identity groups, ones that are affinity groups, sort of based around whether it be regional or racial or ethnic. Sort of groups for students to come together with people with common backgrounds and identities that they share. One of the most active is our One Gen, which is for first generation to college students, and our iConnect, which is international students. And they're often very inclusive, right? So it's really about bringing students together that have a connection to that either life experience or identity that's important to that group of students. And for our international students, that does extend to US citizens who have lived abroad or have come from high school abroad. So that kind of expands a little bit as well. There's a number of mentoring programs that come out of our affinity groups. So upper class students that mentor the incoming students for those groups to help them acclimate in ways that might be more nuanced, more specific, and more maybe personal.
No, and that's great. And I think that especially for international students coming in, they really want to feel included.
Yeah.
They really want to feel like they belong to the community, right? Many of them are leaving families and, traveling all this distance because they want this greater education, but they always want to feel at home as well. So, I mean, iConnect sounds amazing, right? It's nice that they have that for internationals.
Yeah.
Is there any other big resources you think that international students can avail of at CMC?
Yes. So in our Dean of Students office, which is there's names for this. So Student Affairs Office, Dean of Students, there's the campus center, like sort of whatever different schools call it or students are familiar with, but sort of the hub of all student life, staff and clubs and organizations, residence life, all of that. So in there is a staff person who is the Assistant Dean of Students for International Student Services. And she herself was an international student to the United States. And so she coordinates new student orientation, or excuse me, international student orientation, which takes place 3 days in the 3 days prior to new student orientation. So our international students move in early. There's upper class students, international students that run the program with our Dean of Students, and acclimating, moving in early, taking time from however long of a journey that they had. Talking about visas, a lot of logistical things, phones, bank accounts, understanding the surrounding area, going to places like Target, which is very popular here in Southern California, to get bedding and things that were very difficult to bring from their homes and on a plane. And then all of the other kinds of um, resources that might be particularly important for international students to be familiar with. And then they jump into new student orientation, which they do a great job about not covering the same information. There might be a little bit of overlap, but really those first couple days is focused on the common challenges that international students specifically face. And US citizens abroad who are coming to us from abroad are encouraged to attend international student orientation as well. And so then from there, iConnect and my colleague in Dean of Students, that is sort of the main point of support for international students. They host lots of social events throughout the year, a lot of different things that might be important for students to think about when break times come. For graduates, our director of career services works with the entire senior class, and she herself was international. She's from the UK. And so she has a particular affinity for our international students graduating. And so while there's not a separate department for them, there are staff on campus that either in a shared experience or just like myself, really love our international students, serve as a point of contact for really anything and help, bridge any gaps that might be there.
And that's amazing, right? And that's what they want to hear. They want to hear that they're going to be welcomed with open arms. And that's what it sounds like, that's what's going to happen when you
Yes.
get to CMC, right? That is so amazing. Any last words of advice for our students? I think you've shared so much and so generously, and but anything else, Jen, that comes to
Oh.
mind?
Um, I'd say broadly, so whether this applies to a student's interest in CMC or to any college they're applying to, continue to get to know us. We offer lots of events through our websites. If this sparks an interest, then I offer virtual events that go really in depth on CMC. And then be honest with yourself about how you really feel about a college. I've been representing CMC for almost 10 years now. So what I say is if what I say resonates, then that's a sign to maybe dig deeper, to keep going. If it doesn't, then great. You can move on from me, from us, from CMC. And so being honest with students, being honest with themselves about the schools that actually make sense for their interests and they actually enjoy what's being told to them about the institution, what they learn about, they enjoy their interactions with the people who work there. I think that's very indicative of what their experience will be like and their feelings. If you feel lukewarm or sort of neutral about a school, but it's highly ranked or it's prominent in your community, and or among people you know, really think hard about whether that's the best direction for you to put a lot of time and energy into an application, because we ask a lot of students in the application process. So you should also ask a lot of us in terms of like getting to know us and feeling good about who we are as well.
That's great. I mean, thank you again, Jen. You have been so gracious. You've been, just really, I think I learned so much from this conversation as well. And I really appreciate your perspective, your advice, everything that you've shared today. Thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing all this with, all our listeners, all our viewers. And yeah, I hope to connect with you again soon. Yeah, we should do this again.
We
Maybe
should,
when
yeah.
we get more questions in, I'd love to be able to continue the conversation.
That would be great. I'm always happy to chat with students who want to know more and parents. I love working with parents as well. So thank you so much for having me and giving me the space to really dig into CMC.